Welcome back to the Sika Strength News Show. As always, brought to you by the Sika Strength app on iOS and Android. Currently, at the moment, we have launched annual subscription. It's going for the price of €299 per year. As long as you stay subscribed, you'll never pay more than that annually. In the link below, everyone who signs up to annual gets 4 videos per month in the coach chat if you need it. All of these options are available to you. But today, we're looking at Koki Kawanashi. Is a Japanese triple jumper. His best is 15.94, but on his Instagram bio, he's on the mission for 16.5, which takes him into like a next echelon of ability. Now, what's great about this is we've got a load of training from him, and obviously we've incredibly biasedly selected his to promote our way of training, which is basically just what good people do. To be
what good standard sports science from the last 70 years of training would teach you to do. The big reason I love this video is mainly what you can see him doing, right? So you can see him doing standard strength work, standard power work, a lot of capacity work, both on and off the track, which is, as Owen said, the foundation of all good sports performance. There's a second element to this, though, that I think is often overlooked, and particularly overlooked in the amateur side of things, which I know most of you will be, and that is the intent you are putting in training. I know there's a somewhat cool thing to be kind of blasé and laid back, and you're the maverick who just shows up with their gear bag and gets the training session done. But when you see this athlete and how intense he is in training, you cannot overlook how valuable that is to your training. Now, this can come down to any host of things. You can be intense in any number of ways, whether you're working incredibly hard doing your work capacity pieces on the bike. You could also be very intense with your rehabilitation and stretching protocols. And you can, of course, be very intense in terms of your sprinting, your power cleans, all of that very fast, aggressive, powerful work. What I want to tell you is something we often talk about with weightlifters is this idea of you have to force yourself to be fast. And this kind of intent is what we're talking about in that case. If you are slow in the second pull during your power cleans, or if you're a rugby player and you're not as fast as the next back rower who's trying to take your position, you need to actively force yourself to be faster. This might be helped by things like watching other good athletes, so watching how they move, but also watching the speed at which they move. It might be helped by some facilitative loading, so that might be a very slight 5% downhill gradient and doing your sprints there. Or it might be forcing yourself to do this with lighter loads or lighter weights and moving that barbell more quickly. The important overarching thing for all of this is that is the intent you are doing it with. You have to show up to training with your I'm a serious athlete hat on. You have to show up with that intensity. Now, this doesn't mean you're going and maxing out your lifts every day or maxing out your conditioning work on the bike every day, but it means you're showing up to do that job as well as you possibly could.
So if we stick with the intent thing for a second, if you think about you want to run faster, you're just walking down the street, you won't accidentally go faster, whether you're weightlifting or you're fencing, you're boxing, you're playing rugby. None of these things will happen without you intentionally trying to do them more faster and more powerfully. And when it comes to this kind of training, this is such a good way of trying to train that ability because, okay, some people are inherently talented. We can learn technique. We can learn how to throw a punch better. We can learn how to throw a ball better, for example. Any of our skills can be improved. But when it comes to just doing them with more power, with a higher rate of force development, the skill of intentionally doing something, that maximum voluntary contraction as fast as you can do it, is something that has to be trained. And you can see in his training here, he's got a mix of pretty much everything involved in that training. So he's talking about how to make a track and field athlete. But you can see no matter what he's doing, all of his activities, except for the wall balls there for some reason, are incredibly intense when he's doing his resisted sprints, his trap bar deadlifts, his hang power cleans. Everything he's doing is something that he's putting maximum effort into, because this ability then when he goes to his sport, when he's trying to do his triple jump or he's doing his long jumping or whatever activity he's doing, he's got the ability to do that. And this never happens passively. A great thing we like to use sometimes is straight-legged box jumps. Now, you can use box jumps where you're landing to that maximum depth. It's very, very useful, and it's not a bad exercise. But we don't need to worry about the height you get on box jumps so much as the benefit you get from doing straight-legged box jumps, because it forces you to hit the extension more aggressively and do it harder. So when we're landing on the box and we want to land with straight legs, it forces us to try and hit this maximum contraction, try and jump as high as we can with some constraints. And some of these constraints allow us then to make sure that when we hit the peak, we're making maximum effort. And then you can modulate this effort yourself a little bit when you understand then that, okay, if I try hard and I try and get to the limit of what I can do now, then I can get a little bit higher within the constraints I've given ourselves. So that's like one novel piece of something you can do in your training along with many other variables. Now, the other thing here is when he's talking about how to make a track and field athlete, he's given the kind of recipe for general sports science. This is the thing we're talking about. This is something most athletes in some form will be doing for their training if they're doing good strength conditioning. We're talking about this from the soccer players. We've talked about this with throwers, rugby players, judo athletes. No matter what, general capacity is general. Now, there is some nuance individually for each of these sports. Some of them will have more emphasis on some parts. For example, a thrower or a judo athlete is going to have more emphasis, in our opinion, on that top end strength, whereas the track and field athlete will have a little bit less emphasis. But all of these qualities are just general to allow you then to exploit your specific ability when it comes to actually doing your sport. A lot of great S&C research and sports science research and exercise research actually comes out of Japan, and if you read a lot of it regularly, you'll see a ton of that appearing very, very frequently. It's often well constructed. It's often got quite a number of experienced athletes. I almost said enhanced athletes, but a lot of experienced athletes are good quality athletes, which reflect interesting findings in training. They're usually pretty well designed in a lot of cases, obviously not all the time, but they understand that the basic principles of strength conditioning, sports science apply everywhere if we can figure them out. And we were talking about this last week with the thrower, getting the principles down, getting your force training in, which he's doing, weighted push-ups, for example. You'd be surprised how hard it'd be to get a lot of track and field athletes to train their upper body. Cyclists, track cyclists will routinely ask, should I train my upper body? Which is kind of crazy in our opinion to avoid an entire area. You're a very complex unit. That power output, while it might be specifically coming from your legs, your ability to maintain position and increase that power output will be enhanced by having a stronger upper body. He's covering his conditioning, his non-specific jumping and plyometric work, his single leg hops, some of the stuff we specifically wouldn't use. For example, the really heavy overload 1-8 squats are just the basically lockouts, are something we don't find any benefit from. They're not necessarily going to be hugely negative if you adapt to them, but we don't see any major return in them, so we don't feature them in our programs. But I'm not saying that it's not a waste of time for maybe this athlete. Then we've got that high intensity conditioning on the bike where he's just putting a ton of effort in. Now, not only that, he's also got a 140 kilo hang power clean. His body weight enlisted in some of these videos is 69 kilos. So he is so far up there. He's not far off a 2.5 times body weight hang power clean, which is massive. We've got him doing multiple different 207 kilo trap bar deadlifts, which is a high force output. And then he's got the rest of the mix in. You can see a reason. Okay, some athletes don't like doing this is culturally they haven't been exposed to it and they don't understand the value. But some athletes are just really lazy as well. Some athletes hate going to the gym. They hate doing the things that they should be doing. And especially when you're talented, and especially if you come up through a system where the talent has carried you all the way through your teenage years, the problem then is when you meet people in your late teens and your 20s when things start to really peak and you've met this other talented athlete who's been going to the gym like this and they're a machine and they're doing the things they were supposed to doing with the intent all the way through because they're hungry and they're also exposed to good culture around that. That's when you get someone who becomes very, very beneficial and are very productive and very successful as an athlete. So I definitely think the intent behind this, like Dara was talking about, is incredibly important. Now, not every session needs to be, of course, max effort. We need to follow the principles of good strength conditioning and good programming, of course. But when it's time to put the effort in, you'll get far more return on your training for less time spent in the gym if you just get more out of those individual sessions and you put your best foot forward every time you try and do something.
Last thing I want to say on this is when you look at the intensity of those plyos, it's no wonder that most jumpers from track and field leave the sports for injury.
Yes.
Like obviously for triple jump, that incredible fast twitch, explosive movement on takeoff, you have to get to that level of jumping on plyos, and we've repeated broad jumps over hurdles here. But it's no wonder that it's always going to be something. It's always going to be a knee, a hip, an ankle goes. It's always going to be a tendon gives up or we wear away the back of the kneecap. No wonder. Look at how insane this is. I think often, like, we'll see contact sports Or we'll see combat sports and say, obviously, that person got punched in the head for a living. They have some negative impacts of it now. But when we look at this in track and field, rarely do you think that's going to impact the knees long term.
We were in Japan 3 years ago. We met some of the national weightlifting team athletes in Japan, and we were kind of discussing their system. And one of the former national team athletes said the actual problem with a lot of Japanese athletes is they push themselves too hard too often throughout the year, that they'll just do as much volume as possible. A lot of the times they won't be using PEDs, and they push themselves really far, and they won't take any downtime. And as a result, they end up just injuring themselves, being too fatigued to peak effectively, because the mentality is to absolutely murder yourself. So you can, of course, take it too far. So that's why we have to obey those principles of good programming. You need a coach looking at you and being like, look, this is a terrible idea. For example, routinely people will look at the programs on our app and they'll message us and be like, I want to run the anti-glassback program, and I want to run the horse program, and I want to run weightlifting, but I'm also going to cut 15 kilos in body weight as well at the same time. Whereas you're like, hold up a minute. We need to segment these. This is going to be too much. You're just going to overtrain. You're going to burn out. You're going to get injured. Your cut isn't going to go very well. You're going to be upset with training. You need to tailor yourself back and have an objective view of what you can actually do. And then within the confines of what you should be doing, then you go to town on those sessions. When it's the 90 minutes in the gym 4 times a week, then you do those sessions with intent, and then you let yourself recover, and then you come back in. So definitely you can go too far with the intent. One thing as well, I think, is you can see the body weight he has is definitely something where he's trying to optimize that. So we talk about that a lot as well, where the framework is going to be quite similar for a lot of athletes, again, within the segment they're in. But he's kind of maximizing how strong can he get at that optimal body weight. He's obviously incredibly lean. He's not going to be maximizing upper body muscle mass. You're not going to be adding too much here, but that doesn't mean you don't do strength training for the upper body, which I can get can be a concern. If you're a track cyclist, you don't want a huge drag factor with a massive upper body. But the thing is, it's actually pretty hard to get a big jacked upper body. It doesn't happen by accident. You don't end up being like, damn, I'm fucking too jacked. That just doesn't really happen. So finding that optimal body weight, your best kind of power to weight ratio body weight, is actually something that just comes with a bit of time and a bit of training. Most of the time for track athletes like this, being leaner will be better. Sometimes compromising some muscle will be better, but then that can go a bit too far, especially on the female side of things. So you definitely need to be careful of what you're actually doing for your long-term health as well, and your long-term performance. Might it be better in the short term if you lost 5 kilos? Probably. Will that be the best for your long-term development? Not all the time.
But winning is all that matters.
If you need a coach in your corner, direct a coach chat on the Sika Strength app. We man it Monday through Friday, so you get good response times. You can use your video tokens, annual in the link below. And if there's anything you'd like to see on the new show, do let us know.